Yes, it's scripted, but pro wrestling is nonetheless a punishing business. Far too many performers die very young, either from injuries they sustained in the ring or under even stranger circumstances.
Macho Man Randy Savage was known for his verbal intensity, colorful and fringy rock star costumes with cowboy hats to match, and sunglasses.
Wanna light up your life? Yeah! Have those Slim Jim!
Often cast as a villain opposite Hulk Hogan, some of his most memorable storylines also included his manager and then wife, Miss Elizabeth.
Miss Elizabeth will be in a neutral corner. She's gonna see the difference between one man and another man.
While Savage and Miss Elizabeth were married before they began working for the WWF in 1985, their characters did not marry until 1991. A year later, they divorced. Tragically, Miss Elizabeth died of an overdose in 2003. Savage, whose career spanned 4 decades, remarried in 2010. Sadly, he and his new wife Lynn didn't have much time together. In 2011, at age 58, Savage died in a car accident. According to CBS News, he didn't die from the crash, but rather a probable heart attack suffered while behind the wheel, which was the cause of the accident. Fans and fellow wrestlers around the world lamented Savage's death. He was inducted into the WWE Hall of Fame in 2015 by his brother Lanny. Chris Benoit grew up in Edmonton, Alberta, where he first started dreaming of becoming a wrestler. By the time he was 18, he was training in the Dungeon, the gym of Canadian wrestling patriarch Stu Hart. In 2000, Benoit joined the WWF. The Calgary Herald wrote of him, "Benoit was never a larger-than-life cartoon personality like the famous Hulk Hogan. Rather, he was the strong, silent type, a straight shooter who won the fans' respect by virtue of his work in the ring, sans gimmicks." And then, things went horribly wrong. In 2007, Benoit died by suicide after murdering his wife Nancy, who was also a wrestler, and his 7-year-old son, Daniel. Fans, families, and colleagues had a hard time reconciling the family man, friend, and hero they once knew with a man who could commit such a treacherous crime. According to ABC News, Chris Nowinski of the Sports Legacy Institute got in touch with Michael Benoit, Chris Benoit's father. He told him, "I thought brain injuries may have played a role in what happened, and it was worth doing the studies." Junkyard Dog was born Sylvester Ritter in Wadesboro, North Carolina, and he started his career playing football for Fayetteville State. When he could not go pro as a ball player, he decided to start a career in wrestling. Ritter worked in Germany and in Canada with Stu Hart's Stampede Wrestling, but his rise to fame came wrestling in the Mid-South. There was born his character, Junkyard Dog, a role for which he donned a leather dog collar with a large hanging chain. In 1984, he started his career with the WWF. Per the WWE, although he never won a championship in WWE, JYD had quite a bit of success while remaining one of the most popular superstars of the 1980s. Junkyard Dog fought in WrestleMania and had wins over wrestlers such as Randy Savage and the Iron Sheik. Junkyard Dog retired from wrestling in 1993. Tragically, though, in 1998, at only 45 years old, he died in a car accident on the way home from the high school graduation of his daughter LaToya. In 2004, LaToya was able to accept, on his behalf, his induction into the WWE Hall of Fame. Dino Bravo was born Adolfo Bresciano in Italy in 1948, but grew up in Canada and was often billed as the Canadian strongman by the WWF. Deadspin wrote, "Bravo was archetypal of a slightly outmoded sort of bad guy wrestler in a number of ways. The bleached hair, the procession of Weasley managers, the My Buddy's strong dad physique." He got his start wrestling in Canada, but soon went on to wrestle with the WWF, winning the Tag Team Championship in 1978. But according to Slam Sports, his career faltered in the WWF due to steroids. Still, over the course of his career, he grappled with some of the biggest names in the business, including the Hart Foundation, Hacksaw Jim Duggan, and Kerry Von Erich. In 1992, after a great career despite many losses, he decided to retire. After retiring, Bravo joined the Mafia through his wife's family connections. Bravo became involved in cigarette smuggling, and after a deal went bad, he was shot 17 times in his home while watching TV. Bravo was only 44 years old. The crime has gone unsolved to this day. Most accept, given his line of work and the horrific nature of the killing, that it was mafia-related. The Ultimate Warrior was a huge WWF star in the 1980s. He is best remembered for his neon face paint, tiny bikini briefs, and the uncomfortably tight strings tied around his bulging arms. According to WWE, while most superstars slowly walked to the squared circle, Warrior sprinted full speed down the entrance ramp and ran circles around the ring before shaking the ropes like a man possessed. His matches were quick too. At the 1988 SummerSlam, he defeated the Honky Tonk Man in under 30 seconds. His greatest claim to fame is beating Hulk Hogan at the 1990 WrestleMania 6, and then Randy Savage at WrestleMania 7. He even originated those Slim Jim commercials Randy Savage became famous for.
You boys a bit bored? Step into it!
Then he kind of disappeared, leading to all sorts of rumors. After occasionally popping up over the decades, he attended his Hall of Fame induction ceremony on April 5, 2014, and announced he had signed a deal to become an official WWE ambassador. It wasn't to be, though. Tragically, just 3 days later, the Ultimate Warrior died of a heart attack at age 54. Fritz von Erich, aka Jack Atkinson, was a famous wrestler in the 60s and 70s who trained under Stu Hart. He was best known for his signature move, the Iron Claw. Later, he became known as the patriarch of the Von Erichs, a brood of boys who would almost all become professional wrestlers. But tragedy haunted the family. In 1959, oldest son Jack Jr. drowned at the age of 6. In 1984, David, who was known in the wrestling ring as the Yellow Rose of Texas, died in a hotel room while touring Japan. He was just 25. The official cause of death was ruptured intestines, but close friends and family members have speculated that he may have died from an accidental overdose of painkillers or possibly a heart attack. Then, tragically, 3 more of the brothers, each in turn, took his own life. Mike was 23, Chris was 21, and Carrie was 33. Of the 6 siblings, only Kevin Von Erich, known as the Golden Warrior, survives at the time of this video. In the 1940s, Luther Lindsay played college football and wrestled, but due to segregation, he could only play against other Black Americans. When he decided to play professional football, he found work with the CFL. While in Canada, he met Stu Hart and trained with him, after which he moved back to the US to begin grappling for the National Wrestling Alliance. According to the WWE, not only did Lindsay train under Stu Hart, he also holds the rare distinction of having defeated Stu in the dungeon itself, which earned Lindsay such a degree of respect that Hart carried a picture of him in his wallet for 50 years. In the late 50s, Lindsay became the first man to wrestle in an interracial match. He took on Ron Wright, known back then as the #1 Hillbilly, in Kingsport, Tennessee. According to an interview with White for Kayfabe Memories, they had the National Guard up there, thinking they were going to have riots. Lindsay went on to be the first Black wrestler to compete for the NWA World Heavyweight title. His competitor, Lou Thez, said of Lindsay that due to segregation, it was an amazing accomplishment for Luther to even learn his craft. His place in history is not because he was Black, it is in spite of the fact he was Black. Lindsay went on to win multiple championships, but in 1972, at age 47, he had a heart attack in the ring while pinning his final opponent. Lindsay has been inducted into both the National Wrestling Hall of Fame and the WWE Hall of Fame. Don Eagle was a famous First Nation wrestler from the Kahnawake Mohawk Territory near Montreal, Canada. Inspired by his father, wrestler Joseph War Eagle, Don began grappling at age 20. Like his father, he also wore a full headdress. According to Last Word on Sports, Eagle, quote, became the first recognized Native American World Heavyweight Champion when he won the AWA World Heavyweight Championship in the American Wrestling Association. Chief Don Eagle was one of the first generations of wrestlers to be a part of the television era. In 1950, he had his most infamous match against Gorgeous George in Chicago, and it was televised. At the end of the match, the referee tapped the ground 3 times to declare Gorgeous George's victory, but Eagle still had one shoulder off the mat. The crowd was furious, and according to Slam Wrestling, Gorgeous George needed police assistance to escape the ring. Don Eagle put his hands on the referee and was suspended, but he was later able to regain his title. Eagle went on to have a great career, even being a part of what would eventually become the WWE. In 1963, at age 38, he went into semi-retirement due to numerous back injuries. 3 years later, he was dead. It was declared that he had killed himself, but many, including his longtime friend, wrestler Two Rivers, believe he was murdered. Gorgeous Gino Hernandez was a wrestler famous for being affable and, well, gorgeous. Gino was inspired to go pro by watching his stepfather, Luis Hernandez, work in the ring. Luis died when Gino was only 12 years old, motivating the boy to train at a young age under Jose Lothario. Gino started his professional career at only 17 years old. According to Pro Wrestling Stories, Gino wore his stepfather's boots during his first few matches and credited Luis for how easily wrestling came to him, saying, "My dad did it for me. I was wearing his boots. He did everything for me." Gino formed a tag team with his mentor Jose Lothario, only to dump him for Gary Hart. Gino became more of a heel, which is a wrestling term for villain in the ring, and he and Lothario began to feud. Gino went on to win the NWA Junior Weight Championship and team up with Jake the Snake Roberts. Gino began to get a reputation for doing drugs and hanging out with shady people. In 1986, he was found dead in his condo in Dallas, Texas. He'd been dead for 4 or 5 days, making it hard to determine the cause of death. A loaded gun was found, but drugs were not. At first, it was declared a homicide, but after an autopsy found an enormous amount of cocaine in Gino's system, they called it an overdose. Many remain skeptical and think he was murdered. Gorgeous Gino was only 28 years old. Brian Pillman was famous for being a talented wrestler who really knew how to work the audience. Pillman had a difficult childhood. His father died of a heart condition when Brian was only 3 months old, and throat polyps required him to spend a lot of time in hospitals. Pillman went on to be a star football player in high school and then a free agent for the Cincinnati Bengals. But it was when he played for the Calgary Stampeders that he found his true love, wrestling. He trained with Stu Hart in the dungeon and became, for all intents and purposes, part of the Hart family. Later, he was allowed to join the Hart Foundation. Pillman was one of the first wrestlers in the U.S. to adopt the lucha style of flying in the ring, earning him the name Flyin' Brian. Brian succeeded in all of the promotions he was a part of, ECW, WCW, and eventually the WWF, winning multiple championships. But his personality on the microphone made people believe he was a loose cannon. At Super Brawl 6, after losing to Kevin Sullivan, he took the mic and revealed that Sullivan was actually the person who booked the shows, after which Pillman was fired. According to Pro Wrestling Post, Pillman knew what he was doing. He was headed to the WWF and Vince McMahon. Tragically, in 1997, at age 35, Brian was found dead in his hotel room, his bright career cut short. He died from an undetected heart condition, much like his father. Bruiser Brody was born Frank Goodish. Like so many wrestlers before him, he started as a football player. While playing for West Texas State, he was discovered by Fritz von Erich and began his wrestling career. According to the WWE, his 6'8", 300-pound frame made him a star from the very beginning. But the big man's career began to build steam in 1976 when he arrived in WWE and was rechristened Bruiser Brody. Brody grappled all over the globe, fighting everywhere from Indianapolis to Japan to Puerto Rico. And it was in Puerto Rico that his career ended when he was brutally murdered. In 1988, right before a match, Bruiser Brody was stabbed to death in a locker room shower by Jose Gonzalez. Though their views were obscured during the stabbing, wrestlers Tony Atlas and Dutch Mantell said they witnessed the events immediately before and after the murder. According to Oxygen, Gonzalez was ultimately charged in connection to Brody's death, but he claimed he acted in self-defense. Atlas and Mantell were summoned to testify, but didn't receive word until after Gonzalez had already been acquitted. Gonzalez was able to continue his career and to this day gets paid to visit kids' birthday parties. Rest in peace, Bruiser. Eddie Guerrero grew up in El Paso, Texas, watching his father Gory Guerrero, a once famous lucha libre wrestler, grapple professionally. Eddie and his 3 brothers, Chavo, Hector, and Mondo, followed their father's footsteps into the squared circle. Eddie rose through the ranks, working matches in Mexico, Japan, the ECW, and then the WCW. According to the WWE, once he joined the WWF, quote, Eddie wasn't just Eddie anymore. He was Latino Heat. Guerrero won 5 different WWF/WWE titles. In 2001, Guerrero went to rehab for an addiction to pain medication, which reportedly stemmed from a car accident. Then he was arrested for drunk driving. Eddie was let go from the WWF but was able to return in 2002. In 2004, he had an incredible match, winning the WWE Championship. But in 2005, while staying in a hotel in Minneapolis, he was found dead just hours before an upcoming appearance. Tragically, he died of heart failure at age 38.
Professional wrestling is a dangerous job, and it's not uncommon for wrestlers to pass away before their time. For some of them, the end comes before they even leave the ring. Here are professional wrestlers who died in the ring, sometimes with an audience and sometimes without. Mitsuharu Misawa is one of the biggest names of all time in Japanese wrestling. He rose to fame in the 1980s as Tiger Mask, a character who, naturally enough, wore a tiger-themed mask. He was so popular that when he unmasked in 1990, his fame only increased. In 2009, he was a 46-year-old veteran who had been named Professional Wrestler of the Year 3 times and was still competing. The tragic match that cut Misawa's stellar career short occurred on June 13, 2009. One of his opponents gave him a back suplex, a fairly common move. However, what happened next shows that nothing in wrestling is truly routine, and even the most basic moves can turn into tragedies. Misawa didn't move after the impact. The match was immediately stopped. All the wrestlers surrounded the ring, and the crowd softly chanted Misawa's name as doctors and nurses tried to administer CPR. He was declared dead at a hospital, though he was likely already lifeless before he was moved away from the ring. The official cause was heart failure. Malcolm King Kong Kirk was a well-known British monster heel and a frequent tag team partner of the even more massive Giant Haystacks. This former rugby player didn't use a gimmick, as his 350-pound frame was more than enough to intimidate his opponents. On August 23, 1987, Kirk faced off against Shirley Big Daddy Crabtree, who said Kirk had the strength of 3 people. The match proceeded exactly as planned right up until the end, when Big Daddy gave Kirk his finishing move, a big splash that saw him jumping on his prone opponent. Kirk never kicked out from that finisher. The 50-year-old powerhouse was left lying in the ring, but it wasn't the finishing move that killed him. An inquest of the incident discovered that Kirk died of a pre-existing heart condition. Big Daddy was cleared of all responsibility, and even Kirk's widow said she held no ill will against her deceased husband's final opponent.
As long as I live, I'll never forget seeing him laid down there on the canvas, instead of on his feet raging and flying about.
Wayne Van Dyke, aka Richard Delicious, was an independent wrestler working Florida's small promotions. He was just 29 years old when he suffered a series of heart attacks that started during a tag team match at an event arranged by the Ronin Pro Wrestling promotion. He complained to his tag team partner that he wasn't feeling well and suffered the first heart attack right after tagging himself out. After that, things went from bad to worse. The attempts to give him CPR on the scene left Van Dyke with at least 1 broken rib and a punctured lung. He then suffered a second heart attack on his way to the hospital. When he finally reached the facility, he had a third one. At that point, hospital staff had to put him in a medically induced coma. Unfortunately, the damage was too much for his system, and Van Dyke's family soon confirmed the wrestler's passing on Facebook. Japanese wrestler Plum Mariko died in the ring after her opponent powerbombed her in 1997. It wasn't until after the match that the other wrestlers realized that she still hadn't moved and was now snoring, which was a sign that her brain was bleeding. She was rushed to the hospital, but surgery couldn't save her. The 29-year-old died of brain damage. Mariko had accumulated a collection of nasty injuries over the years, including multiple concussions and an undiagnosed brain abscess. Doctors believe she died because of the combined effects of these injuries rather than a single one from the powerbomb. They also said that if she had been examined earlier, she likely would have lived because no doctor would have let her wrestle in her condition. Mariko's passing was the first in-ring wrestling death in Japan. What makes her fate even more tragic is that the signs of brain damage were there. Owen Hart was a member of the legendary Hart wrestling family. At the time of his death in 1999, his gimmick was a masked superhero character known as the Blue Blazer. For the May 1999 Over the Edge show, the WWF decided to give him an entrance befitting a superhero in which he would fly in. An elaborate system of wires was set up to lower him to the ring from the rafters above, but the system malfunctioned while he was 78 feet above the ring, sending him plunging down as he hit the top rope and then bounced into the ring. Though the incident never made it to television, the 16,000 people at Kansas City's Kemper Arena witnessed the futile attempts by the medical staff to revive Hart, who died of internal bleeding. At first, some of the audience members thought the whole thing was a stunt and that the falling figure had been a doll. However, this impression wouldn't last long. The The ring announcer soon informed the audience what had just happened was completely unscripted. Before the event was over, WWF commentator Jim Ross announced to the world that Hart was dead.
Sometimes, one wrong move is all it takes to turn a normal sparring match into a heartbreaking tragedy. Brian Ong and the Great Khali found this out the hard way in 2001 when Khali accidentally killed Ong in a dramatic training mishap that no one could have predicted. The incident wasn't a case where the massive Khali was clumsily manhandling another wrestler. Instead, it was Ong who botched the move known as a flapjack. The move is executed by lifting the opponent up and pushing them in the air, so they land on their face and chest when they hit the mat. Instead of going along with this, Ong held on to Khali's shirt and came down hard, severely hurting his head and spine. As such, Khali never faced any repercussions for the dramatic accident. All pro wrestling, on the other hand, found itself in seriously hot legal waters. The fact that APW allowed Ong to keep working despite his many injuries ended up costing the promotion around $1.5 million in a settlement. On March 21, 2015, a Mexican wrestling legend named Pero Aguayo Jr. died. The popular luchador met his fate in a match where he faced another Lucha Libre superstar, Rey Mysterio Jr. The tag team brawl pitted Aguayo with his partner Manic against Mysterio and Extreme Tiger. Unfortunately, the match ended in a tragedy when a flying kick from Mysterio connected with Aguayo. The impact threw Aguayo into the ropes, where he was left unconscious and kneeling. The match went on for 2 minutes before the other wrestlers and the referee realized the man dangling in the ropes was actually seriously hurt and stopped the match. However, nothing could be done to save Aguayo. His vertebrae had snapped when his head hit the ropes. His ultimate cause of death was a heart attack, brought on by a cervical stroke from his broken neck. Unsurprisingly, the incident deeply shocked the apologetic Mysterio, who had unwittingly caused his friend and colleague's untimely demise. However, Aguayo's family understood the situation and asked Mysterio to act as one of Aguayo's pallbearers.
The fans were like, Ray, come on, man, we know what happened. You can't.
Right.
You can't let this affect you.
Dan Spider Quirk was a kid that seemingly everyone liked. He was a talented, passionate, up-and-coming independent wrestler who worked with various promotions and was part of the close-knit Connecticut Championship wrestling community. Apart from wrestling, he did a ton of work behind the scenes and even ran the CCW website. He also had a number of close friends in the industry. Then, on May 28, 2005, tragedy struck. Quirk had a match at a Universal Championship Wrestling event in Taunton, Massachusetts, when he missed a moonsault and crashed headfirst onto the floor outside the ring. Quirk was only 22 when he died. Later that year, the CCW promotion gave Quirk the indie wrestler's equivalent of a Viking funeral when they dedicated their Wrestle Jam 2 event to his memory. Before the show, they held a ceremony where the entire CCW roster came out to the ring and remembered their fallen friend, sharing their favorite stories with the audience. They even had some serious star power among them. Wrestling superstar Matt Hardy was a guest at the event and respectfully stood by Quirk's friends and comrades for the entire ceremony. After some speeches and a highlight reel, the lights went back up. The promoter told the audience that the show would start soon, and it would be all right to laugh and have fun. After all, Spider would have wanted the show to go on. Larry Moondog Spot Booker had one of the most glorious ring names in all of pro wrestling, with the possible exception of his final tag team partner, Moondog Puppy Love. Booker was a pioneer of the ruthless and hardcore wrestling, working as Larry Latham in Memphis Wrestling until he was picked up by the then WWF as a replacement for a departing member of the Moondogs tag team, Moondog King. Initially partnered with Moondog Rex and working a rabid dog gimmick, Booker had a solid tag career in both the WWF and Memphis and even found some solo success. On November 29, 2003, the most recent version of the Moondogs faced 3 other tag teams in a concession stand brawl match in a Memphis event that celebrated wrestling legend Jerry the King Lawler. The match ended in tragedy when Booker had a sudden heart attack. Describing the events that unfolded, Moondog's manager April Pennington said, "Things were going fine in the ring. He asked me for the belt to use as a weapon. The next thing I knew, he was down." Initially, everyone thought that Booker was simply working the match and selling an injury. However, as soon as Moondog Puppy Love noticed that something wasn't right, the match was hastily finished and the audience was informed of the situation. Sadly, CPR wasn't able to revive Booker, and the 51-year-old wrestler was pronounced dead in the hospital. Wrestler Gary Albright died in the ring during a wrestling show in Pennsylvania. Reportedly, Albright was on the receiving end of a bulldog, a move that involves a wrestler grabbing his opponent's head and jumping forward, thus slamming their head into the mat. While that's certainly true, it should be mentioned that the full story is significantly more complicated. Albright was a former amateur wrestling state champion who transitioned to pro wrestling in 1988. He largely plied his trade in Japan, where his wrestling accolades allowed him to specialize in unscripted, realistic shoot wrestling. Unfortunately, it took a toll on his health. On January 7, 2000, Albright was making a rare US appearance in a match against Lucifer Grimm and was left lying in the ring after a bulldog maneuver. However, it was not the move that killed Albright. The wrestler's heart was in pretty bad shape. It was enlarged, and he had multiple blocked coronary arteries. He also suffered from diabetes. As a result, Albright suffered a fatal heart attack as he took the move, and officials could do little more than pronounce him dead after removing him from the ring. He was only 38. Jesus Javier Hernandez Silva was better known as Oro, and he was only 21 years old when he died. The wrestler met his fate in 1993 when he took part in a 6-man tag team match in Mexico City. It's said that he had told the other wrestlers that he was planning a kobashi bump, a complicated way of taking a move and hitting the mat head first. Exactly how Oro died is subject to some controversy. Reportedly, he oversold a clothesline move with an enthusiastic spin that landed him on his head. One of his opponents immediately tried to pick him up, but Oro collapsed on the mat and died on a stretcher before they could get him in an ambulance. David Shoemaker's book, The Squared Circle: Life, Death, and Professional Wrestling, also tells this version of the story. However, Kyle Dunning of eWrestling News states that the footage of the event doesn't seem to support this. Instead, he says that while Oro did land hard on his head, he managed to stay on his feet for some time, though he wasn't able to land any offensive moves anymore. He eventually collapsed outside the ring. Still, regardless of the precise course of events, everyone can probably agree that Oro's death was extremely tragic and that he left us far too young. Lucha Libre star Cesar Silver King Barón suffered a fatal heart attack in the ring during a performance in London, England on May 11, 2019. Silver King was a famed Mexican luchador who also made an impact on the silver screen. In 2006, he notably starred in the Jack Black comedy Nacho Libre as the antagonist Ramses.
You are the best.
Silver King was wrestling Juventud Guerrera in an event billed the greatest show of Lucha Libre when he unexpectedly fell down in the ring. He managed to get back on his feet after half a minute, only to collapse again while Guerrera, who didn't know anything was amiss, attempted to continue the match. According to Silver King's son, the performer was healthy and drug-free going into the match, but he didn't get back up again. Those who were present called out the event's apparent lack of trained medical personnel and the fact that it took a long time for anyone to notice the wrestler's in-ring predicament. After Guerrera pinned Silver King to end the match, it took a reported 2.5 minutes for anyone to react to what happened. Speaking about the situation that unfolded, a witness said the following: "It was odd that no medics rushed up. It didn't seem like anyone was on hand. Wrestlers then came out and started giving him CPR. Silver King's son later expressed his belief that quicker action might have saved his father's life."
It's easy to forget there are real people inside these wrestling costumes, with lives that sometimes become every bit as dramatic as the stories they're paid to act out. Sometimes all that intrigue comes to a head with the untimely passing of a wrestler, leaving fans with more questions than answers. Born Steve Bisson, the wrestler known as Steve Bradley had a tumultuous career. He started wrestling professionally when he was just 15 years old and would wind up working for Power Pro Wrestling and the WWF/WWE, feuding in the ring with Savio Vega and traveling the world before being cut loose in 2002. On the morning of December 4, 2008, Bradley's body was found in a parking lot in Manchester, New Hampshire. The lot was adjacent to a wrestling school he once operated, and there were no witnesses to his passing. Bradley had been indicted on possession of heroin charges in the months before his death, a not infrequent twist in the lives of athletes who suffer from chronic pain, but a cause of death has never been determined. Police cited no suspicion of foul play, and the death of Steve Bradley remains a mystery to this day. For the uninitiated, there's a subsect of luchador wrestling called Mini Estrella, or Little Star, traditionally dedicated to wrestlers with dwarfism. Two of the more prominent names in the sport were Espectrito Dos and La Paquita, real-life twin brothers of Alejandro and Alberto Jimenez. Alejandro was especially popular, eventually working with the WWF as Mini Mankind. After wrapping up a show in 2009, the Jimenez brothers were escorted back to their Mexico City hotel room by a pair of prostitutes, where the two women laced the brothers' drinks with eye drops. According to their latest statements, they only intended to knock the Jimenez brothers unconscious and rob them, but the dosage they used was intended for much larger people. Both brothers were fatally poisoned, with some questions being raised about whether their murder had anything to do with Alberto's recent interest in local politics. Little is known about the death of luchador Arturo Casco Hernandez, aka La Fiera. He was a second-generation wrestler, the son of Hercules Poblano and the brother to Angel Poblano, both luchadors themselves. Arturo was probably the best known of the three, having held a couple of belts before he went into soft retirement at the beginning of the 2000s. And then on September 10th, 2010, he was found dead in Mexico City. We know he was stabbed 5 times, and it's been speculated that he was attacked as a result of his rumored involvement with hard drugs, but that's about it. The truth has not yet come out. Wrestler Andres Alejandro Palomeque Gonzalez, aka Abismo Negro, was on a tour bus just after midnight in March 2009 when he started acting unusual. According to witnesses, Gonzalez suddenly became panicky and demanded to be let off, despite the fact that the bus was in the middle of nowhere. He got lost in the dark, and his body was later found floating face down in a nearby river. It's been speculated that Andreas was suffering a steroid-induced anxiety attack when he exited the vehicle, but these reports were never confirmed, as his cause of death was simply listed as drowning.
A last voicemail before a sudden death. What did wrestler Roddy Piper say to a friend shortly before he died of a heart attack? His and other wrestlers' final words are more tragic and surprising than you might believe. In late 2000s WWE, Shad Gaspard made a name for himself as part of the tag team Crime Time, along with his partner, JTG. The pair played goofy criminals who would do everything from scalping tickets outside of the arena to stealing other wrestlers' personal items. In May 2020, the 39-year-old Gaspard encountered rough ocean conditions in Venice Beach and subsequently drowned. According to the New York Times, the professional wrestler and his 10-year-old son, Arya, were swimming in the ocean when the currents turned turbulent. An on-duty male lifeguard noticed the incident and rushed into the sea to pull them out. Since Arya was closer, the lifeguard managed to get him first. However, when he went back for Gaspard, the wrestler disappeared under a massive wave. Gaspard's body was found on the beach 3 days later. According to witnesses, Gaspard's only concern was for the safety of his son, as he urged the lifeguard to help Arya.
He handed off his son and pushed him and said, "Save my son."
Widely regarded as one of the greatest in-ring performers of all time and a generational talent, Eddie Guerrero reached the top of the WWE mountain in 2004, winning his sole WWE championship after defeating Brock Lesnar at the No Way Out pay-per-view. Even after losing the title a while later, he continued to be a beloved performer among fans as he would lie, cheat, and steal his way to victory. In November 2005, the wrestling world received a major shock after the 38-year-old Guerrero died of a heart attack. Later, it was confirmed that Guerrero had a heart disease exacerbated by years of using steroids, as well as the recent usage of pain medication. According to the Wrestling Observer newsletter, Guerrero's final words were spoken to his wife, Vicky. Reportedly, the couple chatted at 2:30 in the morning, just before he went to bed, when he took the opportunity to express his love for her. Antonio Inoki remains one of the most important and prominent names in Japanese and global pro wrestling as a whole. As an all-star performer and promoter, his love for sports entertainment shone through in everything he did, which even saw him take on legend Muhammad Ali in a wrestling versus boxing contest. In 2022, Inoki died at the age of 79, with NJPW revealing the cause to be amyloidosis, a disease that affects the organs. Before his death, a 10-minute video was released of him in the hospital where he addressed his fans. In the footage, Inoki admitted that he didn't want people to see him in that condition, but he wanted to address those wondering about him. Toward the end of the video, the cameraman told him that everyone was rooting for him. In cheerful fashion, Inoki said, "This voice that I have is my number one rival, but as long as one has an adversary to push you on, isn't that a good thing?" Macho Man Randy Savage ran wild in the 80s. Even though the focus may have been on Hulk Hogan as the face of pro wrestling in that era, every fan, pundit, and performer recognized the extraordinary abilities of Savage both on the microphone and in between the ropes. After jumping ship from WWE to WCW in the 90s, Savage continued to capture the attention of the world with his over-the-top wrestling persona and buckets of charisma. One of his most high-profile appearances came in Sam Raimi's Spider-Man, where he plays Bonesaw McGraw, essentially a prototype version of the Macho Man character.
Hey, Freak Show! You're going nowhere!
By 2011, Savage was no longer an active wrestler, living a quiet life out of the spotlight. This all changed on May 20th, when Savage died of heart disease. This caused him to lose consciousness while driving the car that carried him and his wife, Lynn. Savage's wife only suffered minor injuries in the resultant accident after her husband passed out at the wheel. According to Bleacher Report, Savage told his wife he was feeling unwell that morning. Lynn thought nothing of it, thinking he only needed to eat breakfast. However, she noticed he still didn't look himself after they had stopped at a restaurant for a meal, and she offered to drive. Savage declined. According to Lynn, he told her, "I think I'm going to pass out," a statement which proved to be his last words. He was 58 years old. John Huber became a household name as Luke Harper, a sinister member of the cult-like Wyatt family, on WWE television. In December 2019, however, Huber departed WWE. He would reappear in All Elite Wrestling a few months later under the moniker of Brody Lee, a name that Huber had used in his early wrestling days. Lee made an instant splash, being revealed as the leader of the burgeoning faction known as the Dark Order and winning the TNT Championship from Cody Rhodes. Despite making a fast start to life in AEW, Lee disappeared from the screens a few months later. In December 2020, it was announced that Lee had died. His wife, Amanda, revealed on the AEW Unrestricted podcast that he had died from idiopathic pulmonary fibrosis. At the same time, Amanda also shared heartwarming stories about Lee and their kids. She revealed how their son Brody wanted to dress up as AEW wrestler Orange Cassidy for Halloween. However, Amanda pointed out that Cassidy only wears sunglasses and a denim jacket, so that isn't really a costume. When she visited her husband in the hospital, she told him how Brody was upset with her for not buying him the denim jacket. She said on the podcast, "I'm not even joking when I say that one of the last spoken words my husband said to me was, 'Go buy him a denim jacket.'" Joni Laurer, or Chyna, broke the mold for female performers in WWE as she defied the traditional model of how women were seen and presented on wrestling television. Billed as the ninth wonder of the world, Chyna became the first woman to hold the Intercontinental Championship and formed a critical part of the legendary faction D-Generation X, becoming one of the biggest stars of the company's Attitude Era. In April 2016, however, news broke that Chyna had died. According to the autopsy report, her cause of death was related to a combination of alcohol, muscle relaxants, and painkillers. She was only 46 years old. A year later, documentary filmmaker Eric Angra shared the last voicemail he received from Chyna with People. Angra had been filming a documentary about her life, and the pair had been in regular communication. In the message, which is believed to be one of her final communications with anyone, Chyna tells Angra that she planned on going to rehab, while also asking the filmmaker how he was doing. She ends the nearly 4-minute message by saying, "Love you, bye." Matt Osborne struggled to make a name for himself in the professional wrestling business until he put on clown makeup. As the villainous Doink the Clown, Osborne tickled the audience's fancy with a gimmick that hadn't been seen on television before. Although he never won a major championship, he remained a mainstay of WWE programming in the early 90s. In June 2013, the 55-year-old Osborne died of an accidental drug overdose. While Osborne had a history of addiction, his daughter Tegan and ex-wife Michelle James suggested something far more nefarious could have been at play involving his girlfriend, Connie Cook, in the Dark Side of the Ring episode, What Happened to Doink the Clown. According to them, James had spoken to Osborne the night before he died. He informed her that he was leaving his girlfriend and that if something were to happen to him, she must take it further. James said in the episode, "I said, Matt, what are you talking about? Why would you say that?" He went, "Seriously, don't let it go." Cook denied any wrongdoing in Osborne's death. Film buffs know Rowdy Roddy Piper for his turn as John Nada in John Carpenter's They Live.
I have come here to chew bubblegum and kick ass, and I'm all out of bubblegum.
However, true culture connoisseurs appreciate him for being one of the greatest on-screen bad guys in professional wrestling history. Look no further than his epic feud with Mr. T in the mid-'80s to see exactly what he was all about. Hot Rod loved to torment his opponents and bend the rules to his advantage, becoming a dastardly figure in both WWE and WCW. Even when Piper played a heroic role, everyone knew a swerve was around the corner. In July 2015, Piper died in his sleep at the age of 61. According to the Washington Post, his official cause of death was listed as a heart attack due to a blood clot. Speaking on his Something to Wrestle podcast, Piper's friend and wrestling executive Bruce Pritchard revealed he received a voicemail from Hot Rod the evening before he died. Pritchard explained how Piper wasn't the kind of person who would complain about his health. However, that day he told him he was feeling unwell. Pritchard said on the podcast, he said, "Because I'm not feeling well, I'm tired. I'm going to go to bed. I just wanted to call and tell you I love you."
That was one of the last calls he made.